Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. As the title will indicate, this is going to be a favorites video featuring some of my favorite things from the month of August. I'm also going to have some reflections to share on things that were prominent during the month, and I also thought I would offer some updates on things that I feel need updating. So I'll begin with a few of those updates, then we'll work our way into the favorites, more so the items, and then we will end with the experiences. So I'll either put timestamps below or something on the screen if you want to skip past the preliminary updates. But I thought I would first address that this channel has reached over 2,000 followers now, which I just wanted to say thank you to anybody watching this, anybody who is subscribed and has been along for this journey. You all are so amazing. This whole community is amazing, and I am eternally grateful. I never really envisioned reaching any of these milestones, but I am happy that there are so many people who I can communicate with, who I can talk to, and I'd really like to do a sort of either giveaway or some sort of celebration to give back to you all at some point, like I did for when the channel hit 1,000 subscribers. So stay tuned for that. I just have to think up what that'll be, and there will probably be a live that corresponds with whatever that giveaway or celebration is. So that should be upcoming. Just need to kind of figure out what that's going to be. The next is that I kind of mentally told myself once I reached 2,000 that I might dabble in and play with the idea of starting a Patreon. I know that that's something that's pretty popular now for a lot of content creators or just people who make videos who like to be a part of this community. And I have some ideas in mind. I'm thinking that it's going to be geared more toward nothing is going to change here on this channel. It's not about having exclusive content necessarily, but I thought it would be nice to maybe have a bit of a book club going as maybe a first tier, having other tiers where maybe there's exclusive journaling prompts and tarot spreads that you might be able to have access to each month. I'm still trying to figure that out. I have a bit of a theme in mind and how it might operate. I am basically the least techie person I know, almost to an embarrassing degree. So it really is about just figuring out the logistics of that, and then also understanding from anybody else watching this, from anybody who is subscribed and would be interested, what you would all be looking for from something like that. My first thought is that its primary function would be to have a bit of a closer community, especially where books are concerned, to have a place to discuss in more depth things that we read. And I tend to really love books. I know some others out there are very into the same types of books that I am, so that might be a way to have more dialogue in that way. So let me know what you all think, if that's something you'd be interested in, if there's anything that you'd want out of a potential Patreon, and I'm going to be looking into it. So there'll be updates on that if I decide to go forward with it. Next, I have not been, I guess, as active on YouTube. That's something I'm sure nobody really pays much mind to other than myself. I'm not that important. We're all focused on our own lives. But I haven't been watching as much YouTube, and there is this feeling of guilt behind that, not in that I feel obligated to watch videos, but I do like to keep up on what my friends and fellow members in the community are doing and interact and support them. And there is this part of me that feels a bit guilty not tuning in as much or not commenting as much. And I don't know, I guess I just wanted to, in some way, maybe apologize. I don't know if I should even apologize for something like that, but I have been a bit busy and also investigating things that aren't in the areas of YouTube. So if you are a content creator, a fellow community member, and you suddenly realize that maybe I wasn't commenting on your videos or didn't seem like I was interacting as much, I apologize. I really enjoy all of my friends and fellow members of the community, so I just wanted to bring that up. And I guess this one it might be featured more so in the experience part of this reflections video of the month, but I just dropped my pen. I have a pad down here that I wrote things I wanted to address. I have been getting into a lot of my other interests as well, and that's something I might make an entire video on, more so as it pertains to spiritual practice, tarot, magic, and all of that. But I've really been enjoying stepping away from some of the spirituality for spirituality's sake. I think I got a bit lost in my practice, and it kind of reached this very stagnant plateau where there wasn't much fueling it. And as I've branched out and allowed myself more access and time in terms of my other interests, I found that it's benefited my spiritual, magical tarot practice immensely. It's enriched it and allowed it a means of, I guess, manifesting or coming to fruition in my practical, mundane life. So I'd like to make a video on that. I've noticed that, for example, if I go back even about a year ago, I used to offer updates all the time or just throw out these sporadic updates as many things were occurring, and I would post at minimum 2 times a week. Now I find it actually pretty difficult to manage 1 video a week, just feeling inspired enough and ready and capable and getting through the whole process of filming and editing and uploading. And it's amazing to me to consider who I was back then versus who I am now. And I don't think that it's anything, I don't think I've degraded, I don't think that I've regressed in any way, but I do think it's very interesting, and I haven't posted a sort of update video in quite some time, and I'm hoping to catch up, and hopefully that'll happen in the way of a live when I do some sort of giveaway or celebration for the 2000 milestone. But now that I've gotten those out of the way, we will proceed into and onto the items, the favorites, the reflections on the month. As always, I start with the decks, first tarot, then oracle and other types of decks. Then I make my way into books that I've read with mini summaries, synopsis, and basically a review on each of the books. And then we move into miscellaneous, and we culminate with reflections or non-tangible experiences. So first, we'll get all of the tarot decks out of the way. Pretty much I worked with the main 3 modern systems as I see it this month. So we have the traditional Rider-Waite. This is just my original copy with the plaid backs, nothing too exciting. I'm not very picky in that way, but this is mostly, it was out on my table because I am preparing to, and if you are watching this on, depending on when this comes out, but today is the first day of another round of tarot classes that I'm teaching, and I teach with the Rider-Waite Smith, so it felt important to me to have this out so that I could, you know, touch back and just get in touch with this deck a little bit more for the sake of teaching with it, so I feel closer to it. So that's been a big one. Of course, there's the Toth, and this is just the greenie. My good old greenie looks like this. So I'm always working with this with clients in a personal way. I kind of fluctuate between either the Rider-Waite Smith, the Toth, or a Marseille when it comes to my own personal practice as well as with clients. I start to even think to myself, what is the point of having any of these other decks when really all I do is use these 3 systems or these 3 decks in rotation, and I really am very remiss in working with any of my other decks. So that's a big one as well. And then as far as Marseille decks go, I have Hodorowski's Marseille. And this one I use quite a bit with clients. I like the vibrant colors. I think it works really well in that way. And of course, my Marseille studies are ongoing. And then I, in a more personal light, tend to use the Midnight deck, which I really enjoy. Its color palette, its mischievousness. I've talked about all of these decks many times, so I'm not going to harp on them too much. And then moving into non-tarot decks that I've featured in my practice, there's always going to be a playing card deck. It's pretty much always Usi's Pagan Playing Cards, the Ivory edition I think it is. That's the one that's still in print. And it looks like this. It's beautiful, it's easy, it's straightforward. I've spoken about it before. And then Lenormand, which has been a bigger area of study for me in recent months as well, alongside Marseille, is just the Green Glyphs Lenormand. And it's kind of in a weird ordering just because I separate out the extra cards that I don't use because there are some duplicates or alternates for some of the cards, but really enjoy this one and have been using it. And the only one that's of any note is this deck. I featured it once in sort of like a vintage deck haul. It's Le Jaro by DeAndre Voisin. It's a Grimoire deck. It's, I believe, from the 80s. It has this system to it. It's meant to be used kind of as an intuitive game that can be played with other people. I tend to like to use it to get out of my comfort zone, work with abstract imagery, more of an intuitive deck when I feel bogged down by the system of tarot or I just need a break or a breather. So There's this one, it looks like this. I've talked about it a bit before. It's beautiful. And that essentially sums up the decks. To me, speaking to the decks is usually the most boring portion of any of these reflection videos because I stick with what I know. I have decks that I like to go really deep with, but as far as sharing them in terms of the month, there's not much to say, although I've had very rich experiences in going deeper with and using those decks. It's not exciting. I'm not a deck sharing channel really, so yeah. And that's another thing in terms of reaching 2,000. I never really thought about that. I went and I kind of had a little bit of a reflection for myself on my channel as it's grown or just become what it is in my journey. And the fact that I've been doing this now for about 2 years on a consistent basis, to me is a little bit crazy. It doesn't feel quite that long. It feels like maybe a few months or half a year, but it's been about 2 now. And just realizing that I guess I never thought of reaching this place, mostly because the videos I make are not geared toward garnering a following. For me, it was always about creating something that I wanted to see, having those dialogues and finding like-minded people, finding a community, and then also gathering or garnering sort of a client base as a professional tarot reader who reads full-time. So those were my primary goals. It wasn't really about reaching any sort of number. And looking back at my videos and realizing the types of things I talk about, I'm amazed anybody wants to tune in and listen and engage with those ideas or what I have to say, especially when, for example, I'm bringing up the same decks all the time. I understand why those channels that bring up a lot of different decks that are fun and exciting get a lot of views. I enjoy watching videos like that, so yeah. Anyway, moving into the books that I've read this month. It was a good month for reading. These are the books. I'm not going to go in any particular order this time. Sometimes I do it chronologically by which ones I finished first and which one, as I make my way through the month, I'm just going to kind of take from the top and speak to them in that way. So the first is The Council of Animals. It's a novel by Nick McDonnell. It looks like this. It's a novel. It was really fun to read. It's very Animal Farm-esque. If you've read it, there's this sort of dystopian, Orwellian way of going about things. It definitely mirrors Animal Farm in a lot of ways, but it's a lot more contemporary, and humans don't really even start in the position of power. I found this actually when I was in New York at a sort of like indie bookshop, and if I'm being honest, I didn't want to spend the money that was kind of like upcharged at this shop. I love buying local, spending local, but I kind of thought I would get it cheaper online, so I did, but that's where I discovered it, and it was really fun to read. It's a shorter read. It has some illustrations every chapter or so. You'll get a nice little illustration of the animals, but essentially, and they call it the cataclysm. There's some sort of apocalyptic event that's incited by humans. Surprise, surprise. I don't think any of us are. And so the animals come together to decide. The core of the novel is them deciding if they are going to kill the last little bits of humanity or if they are going to let them live and potentially, come back to power and allow something like this to happen again. So there's a vote, and then following that vote, I won't give it away, actions are taken. And so I would highly recommend it. It's fun, it's punchy, there's just this insight into the natural world, and yeah, I would really highly recommend this book to anybody who likes the sounds of that. Another one that I reread is 78 Degrees of Wisdom, A Tarot Journey to Self-Awareness by Rachel Pollack. I'm sure none of us are strangers to this book. It's been so long since I've read this back when I read it for the first time, and I've never reread it up until now, but seeing as though I'm teaching another round of tarot classes using the Rider-Waite-Smith, it seemed like my pretty big touchstone reference foundational Rider-Waite-Smith book, one that I know many of us have read and referenced, so I decided to reread it just for the sake of knowledge, and this is one that I tend to recommend to my students. So yeah, I guess there's not much to say here, but I do think it was groundbreaking at the time it came out. It really set the tone for a whole genre of tarot books that highly reference, self-development, psychology, working in tandem with spirituality and energy and kind of merging those two worlds. So yeah, this is basically a mother to a generation of tarot in my mind, or at least one of a few mothers and fathers in tarot times. So yeah, a wonderful book, of course, highly recommend. I'm sure many of you either have it or have read it. So there's that. Another one that I read, a tarot related book, The Tarot and the Magis, Opening the Key to Divination, Magic, and the Holy Guardian Angel by Paul Hughes Barlow. This was actually gifted to me by a client who books readings with me. I didn't ask if I could mention their name on the channel, so I won't, but if you are watching this, you know who you are. Thank you again. It was a really interesting book, primarily on the Thoth. It is less concerned with teaching you what the cards mean and how to work with the deck, and it's more concerned with the opening key spread, card counting, Golden Dawn, teachings and tenets, and those are sort of worked in as each of the chapters essentially take the majors and work from the outside in. So they pair the Fool with the World, the Magician with the Aeon, or, you know, the Judgment card, and the chapters sort of go in that way. So the majors are kind of working closer together, and they've decided to pair and speak to them in that way. And then the author takes the minors where they're applicable, and then also features the court cards in a very interesting light. There's some Kabbalistic elements there, some ceremonial magic, there are rituals, and so this is really an all-rounder. So if anybody's interested in that and knows a bit of the Golden Dawn and Thoth already, I think this might be interesting. It is complex I would say it's complex and nuanced and highly detailed in the way that ceremonial magic and the Golden Dawn can be, so it's it can be a lot to kind of try to digest and to actually fully read through. I'm the kind of person that will force myself to read reference books and the bibliography and all that type of thing. If that's not your shtick, then maybe there will be parts of this that feel a bit dry to you, but I still think the information is invaluable, so I did enjoy this one. Next, we have The Elements of Spellcraft, 21 Keys to Successful Sorcery by Jason Miller. I know this one has been rather popular in recent times in the past few years with the magical spiritual community. Most people tend to rave about it. I can definitely see the appeal. I thought it was amazing. I made a video on just kind of my musings when approaching spellcraft, geared more toward beginners, just, you know, referencing my own thoughts in tandem with this book. I highly recommend this. It's more about the approach and the ideology. You're not going to get actual spells. It's not a cookbook for spellcraft, and it is pretty non-denominational. It's applicable to most cultures and walks of life and can be transposed onto and layered over any way that you might choose to practice. So it's really about the mindset and things to account for, hopefully helping anybody who is a magical practitioner of some sort to get the most bang for their buck, I guess, when it comes to casting spells of any sort. So highly recommend this. I know he has a few other books, Jason Miller does, and I actually plan to read them based on this one. I know there's a financial sorcery, and I think he has one on protection magic or repelling and protection magic, something like that. Both sound appealing, and I'm sure I'm going to eventually read them at some point. And also, it was really cheeky and funny. I like the little illustrations and the way that it kind of comes back around. So each chapter you'll get these little doodles that illustrate the concept that's being spoken about. So we have Embrace the Power of Offerings. There's the sorcerer demon, I command thee. And then the demon says, pump the brakes there, Slappy. Am I doing this for my health? And then at the end, once the point has been made, we reference back to the doodle and why it's so poignant to the topic at hand. So it was a fun book. There's a lighthearted humor to it. It's a pretty quick and easy read, but it's not very surface level. It does address things in depth, and it is pretty comprehensive. Next, we have The Atlas 6. This is a novel. It's by Olivia Blake, I believe. I thought it was Olivia Blake, but I guess it's Olivia. It's The Atlas 6. It looks like this. I used this for my recent book mapping video, where I take the tarot and essentially go deeper with the book through creating a bit of a visual representation of what the book was about to better understand the characters, the narrative, all of those sorts of things. I'll link it around if you are curious, but it's probably my most recent video aside from this one on my channel. It's a little bit of a longer one, not terribly long, something like 350, 400 pages, but it went by really quickly. This was probably one of the favorite novels I've read in the past year or so, maybe even more. if there were a way to sum up my taste in fiction and novels, I would probably just hand somebody this book and say, I like this. The writing style was right up my alley. The topics are right up my alley. It essentially is a world where more fantastical magic exists. It's slightly in what would be the future, I imagine, just given how they reference the population and cultural trends. And there is the Alexandrian Society based on the mythological Alexandrian Library, which contains all of this knowledge. And there's a society surrounding that. Each year or every couple years, they take the most gifted witches, or the elevated version in this world of a witch, which is a medium who has a lot of power. They'll take the most prominent or promising of that group in a given time span and allow them to enter this sort of initiation period. There are 6 of them, only 5 make it. I'm not going to give or spoil too much. There are spoilers when I book map this on my channel, but really, really wonderful. I like the writing style. It's very detail-oriented, which I appreciate. It's hard to poke holes in the plot, and I appreciate that. It shows that the author went to great lengths. They really thought through this world and all the characters. They felt fleshed out and complex in a way that was just, you wanted to know so much. You wanted to be invested in characters, even if you didn't like them. The story is told through the perspective of the 6 protagonists, who are the 6 initiates, or potential initiates into the Alexandrian Society, and it was done in such a way where it was so fluid, and I didn't find myself yearning for there being this sort of oneness. I was still able to get a grasp of the other characters through the mind and through the lens of the other characters, which I think that's just such a difficult way to write, and for it to have been pulled off so well, applause to Olivia Blake. And yeah, there's just this sort of calculated, very heady way where of this, it's very strategic, I guess is the way I would describe the writing. Detail-oriented, strategic, well thought out, methodical. Yes. 10 out of 10 would definitely recommend this one. And I know that there's going to be a second and a third that are both in the works, and I looked it up. I think they're going to be released, if not simultaneously, then very close back to back without there being much of a break in between. My theory is that the characters in this one are going to be the focal point of one of those 2 books, and one of the second or third is going to be through the lens of other characters. And I won't tell you why, but if you get to the end, you'll understand why. The final book, and this one's not much of like a read, it's more of like, I guess a glorified picture book. This is for Love of Angels by Katrina Fried and Melanie Random. Looks like this. Has a sort of wax covering to it. I actually got it in a secondhand shop with a friend. We just had a sort of day shopping, getting dinner, going to secondhand shop, and there was a lot of books. Didn't have much in the way of anything spiritual, but in this sort of fiction or religious, I guess like fiction was near the religion section, I saw this peeking out, and as some of you may know, I work with the angel Gabriel. I work with angels quite often in my magical and spiritual practice, and I've kind of had this turnaround or integration of some of the more religious concepts of my upbringing and utilizing them in a way that works for me, or reintegrating them into my life and practice. This was a wonderful book. I'll share some of the images. It goes into, it's not necessarily super religious. It references mysticism and from multiple, I guess, Abrahamic perspectives, as well as the Kabbalah. There are some invocations and exercises to be done and spells that can be done with angels. It goes into the mythology. We have the cherubic timeline, speaking to the history of why we see little cherubs in a lot of these Renaissance paintings and how that came to be, the fact that angels weren't even really thought of to have wings at one point, and where the first winged angels sort of started or is theorized to have come from. There's the orders and choirs of the angels being referenced, and there's just a lot here, breaking down angels and gender, angels and what they govern over certain things, the way that angels are depicted in media. There's famous artworks, so this was really fun. I did read it cover to cover. It didn't take terribly long. I would recommend it. I don't know if it's in print. I got it in a second-hand shop, and it seems to have been published, I think, in the 80s or 90s, based on the way that the author speaks about the society at large and things that are happening, but would recommend it if you work with angels. So that's that. Those are the books I've read, the decks I've worked with, and now I guess we'll make our way into that more miscellaneous category. Did I even take out any miscellaneous things? No, I didn't bring out anything. I didn't really purchase much in the way of show and tell, if that makes sense. But as far as experiences go, I'm teaching that tarot class. I had a lot of fun just really embracing the end of my summer. This past full moon, or the blue moon in Aquarius, I actually got really invested in my spiritual practice. I'm not one to hold and stick to the wheel of the year too stringently, and I'm not always right on the money with the moon cycles and doing something that's really applicable, but every once and again it just happens to fit and I feel compelled. So I did do more of a big working, especially in regards to, I guess, recommitting or reconvening with the deities and higher powers that I tend to work with, which are the angel Gabriel and the Sheila Nagig. So that was really wonderful. I did actually charge my crystals and do all that type of more, stuff, things that I don't actually do. I never get around to putting my crystals out in the moonlight. I'm very bad about doing things like that, but I sort of revamped my space a bit, nothing too drastic. Maybe I'll do an updated altar tour, sacred space tour and talk soon. I guess maybe there are some more changes coming in that way. I felt very in touch with my spiritual practice this month compared to other months, and I think that's connected to what I was saying in the beginning, just being more invested in other areas of my life that are not inherently spiritual, things and hobbies, just like getting back to going to the gym, which is something I haven't done in a very, very long time. Investing in my passions that have to do with aesthetics like fashion. For those of you who don't know, this channel was actually started as a fashion channel many years ago when I was in college, and I sort of repurposed it, and that was the origin of this channel. So I've always been interested in that. It's not like I'm crazy into fashion and going, but I am interested in it. And so just allowing myself that and understanding sort of the boundaries and lines of the practical mundane world and my spiritual world, and how a degree of balance is definitely in order and needed. That is something, like I said before, that I would love to make a video on, my experience and my journey there and where I've arrived and what I think. So I may very well do that, but that's something I need to think about a bit more. Other than that, I believe that about sums up the month. Let me know how you're all doing. I would love to check in. I do like to know a lot about you all, anybody who is watching this. And in regards to that Patreon, feel free to give me suggestions or your thoughts on that, if there's anything that you would want from it, if you would even be interested in it at all. And of course, like I said, nothing here would change at all. It's more so just extras and things that I think would make for a nice little community space that's more manageable in terms of conversations. And I'm very open to suggestions in that way, along with suggestions for a 2K celebration, because it's meant to celebrate all of you and your presence in regards to this channel. So I want it to be about all of you. So if you have anything you want from that and a giveaway, let me know. But I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun and interesting and you'd like to hang around for further communication and just videos. And until next time, bye.